Hello and welcome to another edition of Geezerology on YouTube. This will be our first presentation of 2022. 2021 is thankfully in the rearview mirror, and here's hoping this new year is better than the one just retired. I'm Bob, and joining me is Scott from Florida, where it's always sunny and weird. Also with us today is Dan, holding court on the east side of Missouri in the venerable city of St. Louis. I'm at the opposite end of I-70 from Dan on the western edge of the Show Me State in Kansas City. Winter has finally arrived, at least here in Missouri where I'm at. There's snow on the ground and bitterly cold overnight temperatures. But anyway, let's set aside winter's woes for some lively discussion about all things music. Today, Dan and Scott lead us in a discussion about an album that helped herald in a new style of music, appropriately called New Wave, and that was on the cusp of the so-called second British invasion of the U.S. music scene. Joe Jackson released his debut album, Look Sharp, in 1979. It spawned his first hit single, Is She Really Going Out With Him? Wikipedia describes the album as a mix of rock, melodic jazz, and new wave. The new wave genre sprang up in the late 1970s, had its heyday in 1983, and subsequently died off around 87. It evolved out of the punk music movement. New wave, though, wasn't quite as angry and antisocial as punk, and thusly was much more palatable to the masses. It was radio and wildly MTV friendly. It's been described as a mixture of the energy of punk and a bit of glam, pop, art rock, and dance. In addition to Jackson, notable new wave performers included Elvis Costello, The Cars, The Police, Duran Duran, Blondie, and Graham Parker. And that list goes on and on. Jackson's debut album was a critical and commercial success. In 2013, Rolling Stone magazine named Look Sharp number 98 in a list of the 100 best debut albums of all time. Is She Really Going Out With Him reached the top 40 in 5 countries and was number 9 in Canada. The album reached number 20 on the US Billboard chart and has been certified gold. Jackson recorded 20 studio albums over his career and received 5 Grammy Award nominations. He has produced albums in the new wave, jazz, and classical musical genres. So, Scott, why don't you kick things off by telling us about your introduction to this album and your impressions of Jackson's music?
Yeah, well, thanks, Bob, for that.
You're welcome.
I just want to tell you we don't have any winter woes here in South Florida either. We're at about 85 degrees right now.
And you're disgusting.
Expecting a cold front to come in to get us down into the 60s overnight tomorrow night. That's
My heart bleeds for you.
Yeah, Joe Jackson. I actually I didn't follow this whole new wave movement as it was happening so much. Yeah, I mean, Jackson was kind of a contemporary. He was closely aligned, I remember at the time, with Elvis Costello and Graham Parker, all of them being basically singer-songwriters that emerged out of the punk movement in England at the time. I actually didn't become a fan of his until a few years later when I saw him on Saturday Night Live performing his song Steppin' Out. This was a few years later. This is about 84 or 85, somewhere in there, which became a big hit for him. And then after I became a fan of that album, I became a huge fan of Joe Jackson. And then I went back and retroactively started catching up to him. And this is a fairly landmark album for him. It like Bob said, it helped define that whole movement there. A lot of people refer to it as a post-punk. There were some punk influences going on in this new wave movement, but it basically, like Bob said, brought this line of music into more into the mainstream. There was a little more songwriting craft going on with this stuff. especially I'm thinking of Costello and Parker and Joe Jackson. There's they were really they really tried to add some sophistication to their songwriting that the punk bands didn't, and also add some sophistication to the arrangements. It's still at its base just 3-chord rock and roll. This particular one, Jackson put a little more of a reggae and ska bent to the music. You can really hear it, and especially in a few of these songs, you can really hear that it's a heavy reggae beat. A lot of people were being introduced to reggae around this time, and Jackson was one of them who started using it a little bit in his music. Over the course of his career, Joe, he was very adventurous. He was the most adventurous of these guys. He would start moving into like 1940s style jazz and stepping out. The one where I got onto was more of a jazz lounge feel to it. But this one was pretty good rock and roll. This is an album that he recorded. It was actually recorded by what he called the Joe Jackson Band. It was a 4-piece band with Graham Mabey on bass, who maybe's been stuck with Jackson through his whole career, maybe still works with him. But a guy named Gary Sanford on guitar and a guy named David Houghton on drums. This was known as the Joe Jackson Band. But when A&M Records signed him, they decided that they just wanted to market it as Joe Jackson as a solo artist. A few years later, they started crediting the Joe Jackson Band for as long as they're around. And actually, the Joe Jackson Band is back and has recorded 3 or 4 albums in the last 10 years. But anyway, this is just, to me, it's just infectious rock and roll at its core. Songs like "Is She Really Going Out with Him?" You probably know that song. You probably heard that. At least in your subconscious, is one of those songs where if you heard it, you say, "Oh yeah, I remember that one." But pretty much from top to bottom, there are 11 tracks here, and it's all just really good, infectious rock and roll. The one thing we hear on this album, and Joe Jackson sticks with it through the entirety of his career, no matter if he was doing some form of jazz, if he was doing, big band standards or whatever. There's always one thread that ran through there, is this guy knew how to write a 3 or 4 minute pop song. The guy could write a good pop hook in his sleep. Every one of these songs has just an ass shaking, toe tapping, get up on your feet and dance pop hook to it. It's just really consistent throughout his entire career. Not when he went into some more instrumental classical music for a time there. Obviously it wasn't there then, but through his entire career, this guy could write and he could deliver a pop hook. And that's the thing that always stuck with me on this, more so than anybody else. Highlights here, Is She Really Going Out with Him? Obviously that's a good one. That was the first single off the album, and they released it a few months before the album came out, and it was a success and made the album success here in the US and in the UK. They released 3 or 4 more singles on this album, which never went anywhere in the US anyway. Sunday Papers was a single that came out. It's become a well-known song by Jackson, but we know it more as a deep cut than the single that was released. Look Sharp, the title song, is a good one. Fools in Love, Do the Instant Mash is just a guitar burner. But one thing I wanted to mention here too that makes this album a little different than what we were hearing at the time is that there wasn't a whole lot of instrumental virtuosity going on here. The most dominant instrument here is not the lead guitar. Lead guitar, there's really no lead guitar here. This is all rhythm guitar. This guy just played a rhythm guitar. This is all just a rhythm section thing. And Joe Jackson is obviously the lead singer, and Jackson plays piano and harmonica. And the only solos we hear in this album is every once in a while Joe will do a harmonica solo, or every once in a while Joe will do a piano solo. But the most dominant instrument on this album is Graham Mabey's bass guitar. It seems like all the melodies are in here are carried by the bass guitar, right? I mean, throughout, you'll hear the rhythm guitar now and then. The production is a little bit thin. I don't want to say thin. It's not lo-fi or anything like that. There's just not a lot of flourish here. There's not a lot of showing off going on here. It's just a good rhythm section, some melodic bass lines, and Joe Jackson's singing his heart out with these nice little infectious pop tunes and pop hooks. It's great stuff. It's really good stuff. The more I haven't listened to this album in a while, and I've listened to it a few times in the last couple of weeks, and the more I listen to it, the more this thing just got got into my body, got into my spine, and it's just really good, catchy, feel good stuff. The thing that survives here from the hardcore punk movement are Joe Jackson songs. The lyrics here, there's a lot of cynicism here. There's a lot of what I would call teenage style angst going on here. I mean, Jackson's in his early 20s when they were working on this album, and his lyrics eventually matured over the course of time, where he started writing more adult themes. But in this one, I mean, this sounds like the lyrics come right straight out of the punk movement. It's some teenager who is, he doesn't know his place in the world, and he's trying to figure it out, and he's just really cynical and angst ridden here. Is she really going out with him? It's him like looking out of his window and seeing all these guys walking around with a girl, and he sees his girlfriend out with another guy, and he can't figure out why. He can't figure out why he can't fit into this world, and why he can't, get a girlfriend, right? And that's the theme that runs pretty much throughout this album. It's I mean, for 3 or 4 old geezers like us, it's like it has no relevance to our life now. But I got to tell you, listen to these lyrics and listen to these songs, it puts me back. It brings me back, and I remember going through this stuff that he goes through here. It's just really good songwriting. It's he hits a chord that we've all gone through, and it's just universal, and the music is just really catchy and infectious, and really sophisticated. It's really sophisticated rock and roll, even though it's basic. There's not a whole lot of there aren't a lot of layers to it, but it's sophisticated at the same time. Really just really good, just really good craft going on here. And Dee, I know that you and I talked about, we discovered that we're both Joe Jackson fans. Let me turn it over to you. Tell us about your relationship with Joe Jackson and his music and this album.
Okay, Scott, thank you for the comprehensive overview of the music and the time of voice. So I'll try to fill in a few of the gaps. I was introduced to Joe Jackson like everybody. Well, I was in starting my Air Force career, and I was at Fort Benjamin Harrison, and it was winter, and all you had was AM radio when you could catch it. And I heard the single that spring when it was released in the U.S., and I thought, I loved the first line, and it was just, you know, something off kilter, but it worked. And then I had a buddy who moved in across the quarter from me from Connecticut, who I'm still friends with. And he was a big, more of a punk, new wave guy. And we were talking about stuff about new wave music and some of the East Coast bands, like the Cars and all that. But I never really cared for the Sex Pistols or the Clash. I thought Ramones, they had their place, but I didn't appreciate them at that time. So when I heard Joe Jackson, I thought, okay, I'm getting this record. And let me rephrase that, cassette. I was so much on the move. I was, you know, didn't know where I was going to be. And
I got the real thing right there.
Yeah, there you go. I've got somewhere on CD, and I thought just by the album cover, the music is probably going to be maybe as sharp and, I don't know, jazzy as the photograph. But anyway, one of the things I liked about it was, yes, just along with some of the punk new wave stuff, the songs were short, but he had more melody. And I think the band that he had assembled were a little bit, you know, better musically than some of the other things going on. And, you know, like you touched on, a lot of the topics that he discussed were relevant to me too. You know, you're going through that young adulthood thing and girls and trying to figure out what's up, what's down. But what I liked about it was his voice is distinctive. When you hear Joe Jackson sing, it's him.
Yeah, you know, it's Joe Jackson.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, some of the other songs on there that he gives a little, you know, how should I say, he gives throws out a little social comment here and there, but my favorites are Sunday Papers and Happy Loving Couples, because he hated Happy Loving Couples because he wasn't one of them. But he was able to fashion that into, you know, 3-minute pop songs. And I think part of that reason, maybe new wave or that punk movement, it was similar to what was going on in the late 50s and 60s, real short songs, but with a lot heavier guitar, bass reliance. And as you said, yeah, the bass stands out on this. Gary Sanford on guitar, and it was a great cassette just to pop in and listen to. And I think he was Jackson was sort of lumped in, I guess, with Elvis Costello, maybe Nick Lowe, but Jackson was always, if you look into his background, he was you know, classically trained. He, you know, took up violin when he was 11 and then took up piano. He won a scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music. So he had all that background with composing and music theory. And of course, this would show up later on in his career, but for a debut album, yeah, I think this ranks up there because he had a tendency to, you know, be adventurous, try other things. And he's just went on to have a stellar, varied career. I mean, my gosh, 5 Grammy nominations. He won 1 Grammy in 2001 for Best Pop Instrumental Album. He scored the movie Tucker. And, you know, he's done other albums which were nods to jazz like Duke. And then, as you mentioned, with his later album Stepping Out, that was kind of an urban jazzy lounge infused. But back to this album, the part I like about it is, number one, I think Jackson's vocals stand out, and yes, the guy can write a hook. He pulls you in, and you know, as opposed to all the other punk and new wave, with the exception of a few artists, I think he's probably the best vocalist. And with Jackson now, the good thing about it, as far as boomers and geezers, he is having a 2022 tour. He's going to hit European dates, and he will not hit the States until looks like early May. However, the the uh, the heart of the Midwest is not on there. I don't see Kansas City or St. Louis. I do see Chicago, but aside from that, I did see Joe Jackson twice in concert. Once was at the University of New Mexico when he was out. It was about the same time as the album Night and Day was out at the University of New Mexico campus. And the interesting part about that is, of course, this is a different evolution from his debut album that he did. There was not a guitar player on stage. He had percussion and keyboards because a lot of the stuff that he was doing then didn't really call for it. I recall that pretty well.
Yeah, Night and Day was 1982. And
yes.
Yeah, I don't think there was a guitar on that album. Now that you mention it.
Yeah, and it was on a. I had to go back to it. I knew roughly the time I saw him, and so he was writing the success of Breaking Us in Two, and that was pretty interesting. But saw him again in 2005 when he toured with Todd Rundgren, which you might scratch your head and say, what are these two guys doing together? But they toured with a string quartet called Ethel. They played a few songs. Joe Jackson would do his set, and then Todd Rundgren would do his set. Actually, I preferred Joe Jackson's set because I recognized a lot of his stuff, and then they came out and did a couple songs together. But yeah, I'd like to see him again this year if possible. I don't know if that's going to happen, but yeah, for anybody wanting to review the punk new wave thing, I think this is definitely a standout, debut album. And one of the things I ran across was one of his quotes he said they were trying not to intentionally to do a new wave sound, what was going on in 77 or 78. They just wanted to put enough space in the instruments to let that stand out. They did not want to do that. He was, and as I think you mentioned, Scott, they were trying to infuse some reggae into that, and that comes across in some of these tunes. So yeah, that's my personal take on on his debut album, and credit him for doing different styles and doing different approaches to popular music. So he straddles different genres, the pop and jazz. So who knows what his new tour is going to be, but
he doesn't straddle that stuff. I mean, he just dives head first into
he'll dive into
and a few different genres.
Yeah, there was and there's a certain energy, to Look Sharp. It's just about all the songs are up tempo, as you said, toe tappers, but it's all accessible, good stuff. And so yeah, Joe Jackson, I'd say almost a 4.5 star for a debut album for that time.
When we decided to do Joe Jackson, I went and listened, to the album on streaming, and I've only been able to listen to it once, to be honest. And it wasn't bad. I mean, I could tolerate it, and if it was on, I wouldn't leave the room because it was playing. But I don't know if I was compelled enough to really want to go back to it again. I'd have to sit down and give it some more listens. Like I said, I obviously recognized the hit single off of it. I remember the song Sunday Papers, and there were a couple tunes on there that I liked, but again, it's not totally my kind of thing. I appreciate the comments you two guys have had. It's given me a little bit better understanding of the music and why it appealed to you. And if I go back and listen to it again, I'll have those thoughts in my head, and maybe it will, give me a better appreciation of it. But like I say, I'm a little bit more of a traditionalist at heart, so I'm kind of the outlier here. But I thought you guys did a great discussion, and I enjoyed listening to it.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add, Bob, there is that with Joe Jackson and I, you talked about Elvis Costello and Graham Parker, and I love Graham Parker's for the was it Rust? It was his debut album, and Squeezing Out Sparks.
Yes.
No, that wasn't his debut. That was
that his second one?
That was a live album, Squeezing Out Sparks.
No.
I don't know. It was studio. Yeah.
No, but that was his third or fourth album. He had a couple.
Was it?
Anyway, yeah.
Anyway, there was that was all going on, and then with I mentioned Nick Lowe along with Joe Jackson in that, and there was also bands like the Cars and of course Blondie coming up behind, and the music was all under 3-minute songs, real crunchy, real tight. That's why I thought you would prefer the early Joe Jackson as opposed to the later on Joe Jackson, Bob. But yeah, it's certainly has its own place in time. I came across a quote from Joe Jackson, and he said he was happy that people still liked it. It was like 25 years after the album's released. He said, but the album reeks of London 1978 to 1979, I think, as far as all his inspiration for his song titles. So, obviously. So that's all, my little sidebar.
I saw Joe in concert in Washington, D.C. And I'm trying to, it would have been, it was a thing. It would have been around 1990 or 1991. I remember it was this little subterranean club, and he was working on material at the time for his album Laughter and Lust, which came out in 1991. And I remember that that was like it was a workshop tour. He was doing this tour. It wasn't a formal concert or stage show or anything like that, but he toured up and down the East Coast, and was just working on this new material that they were getting ready to record for which turned out to be Laughter and Lust in 1991. And but I saw him on Saturday Night Live in 1982 doing Steppin' Out. Night and Day just came out, so he was on Saturday Night Live promoting that, and it blew me away. I just thought it was just wonderful, and that's how I became a Joe Jackson fan. I ended up owning every one of his albums through Laughter and Lust. 1, 2, 3, 4, about 10 of them. And good stuff. Good, and you never knew what you were going to get.
Yeah, he
you never knew what you're going to get when you're buying a Joe Jackson album. But it was always interesting, no matter what it was. He started getting heavy into classical music after Laughter and Lust, and he lost me there. But I do know that through the 2010s, in 2012, 2015, and 2019, he released albums.
And now on this upcoming tour, he has his bass player way back from Look Sharp days.
Graham Maybe. He's been with him through his whole career.
So, and it looks like just a 4, maybe 5-man lineup. So maybe they are gonna. Who knows what he's gonna play? Actually.
Yeah. Night and Day was by far his most successful. That was a platinum selling album. It hit number 4 in the U.S. charts. The one interesting one was 1986 album called Big World, and this was one where it's all original songs. It's a live album, but it's all original songs. And what he did, he went on stage and recorded over 2 or 3 nights, and he and his band went on stage, and the audience was instructed to. They didn't want any audience noise, but he just wanted to record it in a club, and getting the vibe from the audience, and and record it. It turned out it might be my favorite Joe Jackson album. It's called Big World from 1986.
Thanks, guys, for that illuminating discussion, and we want to thank all of you for tuning in. Every Wednesday, we release something new with these panel discussions, and throughout January, our Wednesday offerings are going to focus on the music of several classic rock stalwarts, including Jimi Hendrix, Creedence Clearwater Revival, the band, and we hope to wrap it up at the end of the month with a special thing about the Doors involving my millennial daughter and her exposure to their studio albums. And then be sure to check out our Freeform Friday presentations each week. And in there, we do individual reviews of books, movies, and television programs that have caught our attention. So anyway, take care, everybody. And here's wishing you a wonderful new year.
Happy 2022, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Same for me.